So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Lisa Beasley and I'm the Aquatics Team Leader for Monash Sport, and I will be your host for today's Monash Sport webinar, A Journey with Carol Cook. So firstly, I wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land we're gathered today, and I pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you are joining us from today, if you're not in Melbourne. Before we begin, I want to take this opportunity to let you know how today's session will be conducted. So unlike some of our previous webinars, Carol has requested that you leave your camera on, as she loves to see everyone's smiling faces and to connect with you all. So we encourage you to have your camera on if you feel comfortable, but please keep your microphone on mute. We would also love if you could leave any questions that you may have for Carol in the Zoom chat, and we'll endeavour to answer as many of these as possible towards the end of the webinar. So now that our housekeeping is out of the way, we would like to officially welcome you to today's Monash Sport webinar, A Journey with Carol Cook. As I mentioned before, my name's Lisa. I'm the Aquatics Team Leader at Monash Sport, and I've been involved with the many MS Mega Swims that have been hosted by Monash Sport over the years. So I'm really excited to be your host for today's session. In lieu of Monash Sport's 10th year of hosting the MS 24-hour Mega Swim, which would have taken place last weekend, and unfortunately we had to cancel due to COVID, we are thrilled to be joined by the 24-hour MS Mega Swim founder, three-time Paralympian, multiple Paralympian medalist and Paralympic champion, and member of the Order of Australia, Carol Cook, for an inspirational webinar on her journey. We believe that she's joining us from the last days of her quarantine after returning from the Paralympics in Tokyo, where she won a silver medal. So please help me in joining to welcome Carol.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's absolutely fantastic to be here. And yes, I'm on day 13 of quarantine, so I have 2 more sleeps, and I can finally get home after an extremely long campaign of 3 months and one week. I relocated up to Brisbane before the games. And unfortunately, as most of you know, I had a crash at the games, and so I've been late coming home. But I would love to congratulate Monash. You know, even though you're not having your swim this year for the 2nd year in a row, you've still raised almost $5,000. And I really want to emphasize that the donation button is still alive, so anybody listening can still donate to Monash, and I'm sure that will be put into the chat multiple times over this. Now Monash has raised, you know, well over close to $180,000 in their 10 years, and I think that's just incredible. I'm going to share my screen with you now. Can do that. Technology, don't you love it? And I like to talk about the road to success. And to be honest, Monash, you've been on that road for 10 years, and I just think it's absolutely fabulous. My road to success has taken a bit longer to get there. Obviously, I'm not Canadian born, or I'm not Australian born, I'm Canadian born. And yes, at the beginning, and you can now say you've seen Carol Cook naked. I was only a couple of months old, but there I am in all my splendor. I grew up in Canada, just one of 2 girls, and you know, we were always taught to believe in ourselves and to try and accomplish anything we wanted to, and so I was very lucky in that I had parents who instilled that in both my sister and I. I was the oldest of the 2, so I was probably a little bit of a bully growing up as a kid, but we are very best of friends now, my sister and I. Okay, now my screen isn't working. There we go. So my sporting life in Canada, you know, from a very early age, look at that. My grandfather had horses, so he tried to make me a horsewoman. It didn't really work. I loved gymnastics. And at the age of 9, that's me at 9, and no, I can't do that anymore, and nor do I want to try. But at the age of 9, I decided I wanted to represent Canada at the Olympics in gymnastics. I'd seen my first Olympic Games in 1968, and I was 7. And I saw these women doing these amazing things, and that's what I wanted to do. So at 9, I went to an elite gymnastics club to try out, and we had to go up to the table, give our name. I gave them my name. Then they took our height, and then they made us stand on scales. And the woman at the desk wasn't very nice when she said, "You're too fat to do gymnastics. You can't come in." I couldn't even go in to show them what I could do. And of course, my best friend, Sharon, at the time, she got in, and her mom had driven. So I had to sit outside and wait for her to do her trials. And by the time I got home, I was an absolute blubbery mess. And I slammed the door running in the house, and I slammed my bedroom door. And I think my mom was coming in to give me hell for slamming doors and saw me upset. And she said to me, "What's the matter?" And when I told her, she taught me a couple really important lessons. She said, "If you want to keep doing gymnastics, you just do gymnastics. Don't let anybody tell you you can or can't do anything. But if you want to go to the Olympics, maybe try another sport." So needless to say, I did. I started swimming. And at the age of 15, I was swimming, training 5.5 hours a day, and I absolutely loved it. So my goal then was the 1980 Olympic Games in Moscow. As most of you might know, in 1980, most of the Western world boycotted those 1980 Games. Something about Moscow invading Afghanistan. So funny how, times change. And I was devastated because that choice or that trial of trying to get on the team was just taken away from me, no fault of my own. So I was at a point in life where I decided, what am I going to do? I was finished high school. I hadn't made the games. And back then, if you were a female and 18 to 20 and hadn't made it at the top of swimming in the world, you were looked upon as washed up. I mean, we know that's different nowadays. And I thought, well, I got to do something. I got to get into the real world. I really didn't want to go back to university, or I didn't want to go to university. I was sick of school. I wanted to do something. Now, my dad had always been a police officer. His father had been a police officer. Funny enough, he met my mom, who was a police officer. She was the 14th woman ever hired on the Toronto police force. So she was pretty progressive herself. So yep, what did I do? I joined the police force and followed in their footsteps. I spent 4 years working in uniform and then went into 4 years of working undercover. And funny enough, that's the only picture I have of me buying drugs and walking out of in that little baggies, a bunch of drugs that I bought at this little bodega. Life was exciting. It was challenging. And after the 4 years, I went into the detective office, and I absolutely loved it. I just loved trying to think the way the bad guy would think, and how can we solve this crime. But I think after a number of years in there, one case really got the better of me, and it was a sexual assault case. And I won't go into details, but needless to say, the judicial system hasn't changed much in all these years. And I was fed up with it, and I decided I needed a break. And I took a year leave of absence from policing, and I came down to Australia. And funny enough, at the end of that year, as we do, I met a man. I had to come back to work because I'd run out of money. And we traveled back and forth for about 9 months until Russ decided to propose. And that was it. I handed in my badge, said my goodbyes, and I relocated to the other side of the world without family. And it's funny, I remember sitting on the plane and thinking, what are you doing? You know very few people in Australia. You've got a couple good friends, but your whole family's here. But I went through a whole gamut of emotions. I was excited, and I was tearful, and I was scared, and it was just unbelievable. But to be honest, life in Australia has been incredible. Yes, that's a very old picture of my wedding. We've now been married 26.5 years. We celebrated our 25th anniversary in lockdown, which was just wonderful. Actually, I was being quarantined for the last 7 days of the quarantine because I'd been on a plane with somebody who had COVID. So our 25th wedding anniversary wasn't great. We got the 26th in before we went into another lockdown, which was good. I made friends. I kept swimming. I joined a local masters club, and I couldn't believe that I could actually swim in an outdoor pool in the middle of winter, because you couldn't do that in Canada. And life was amazing. I started a new career at Australia Post, although at the beginning, my brain was a bit screwed up because I was still thinking police. I'd had 14 years of it, but my brain was thinking postie. And so I was having some really bizarre dreams of delivering parcels in a police uniform and arresting people in a postie uniform. So luckily I've got past that, and the brain's not so screwed up anymore. However, life does change. And I think that's the one constant in our lives, is that we can always expect change to happen. And not a lot of us like it. And I don't like it, but it's about grabbing what you can with that change. So the 23rd of April, 1998, and I know exactly the time, it was 2:15 p.m. I'd had some unusual symptoms from February, and I hadn't been at work for quite a while. I had come back from the Masters Nationals, and they were in Hobart, and I'd swam really, really badly. And I couldn't understand why, but I felt like I had the flu coming on, and I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. My balance had gone. I looked like I was in a pinball game walking down our hallway. And then my eyesight started to go. And after, dealing with my GP and dealing with an optometrist, they suggested I go see a neurologist. So I had gone, and he'd sent me for a whole bunch of tests. But come the 23rd of April, my symptoms were gone. And I had to go back to the neurologist to find out the results of the tests. And I thought, oh, geez, I'm wasting his time. And as I walked into his office, he was really gruff and seemed like he was in a big hurry. And he pointed to a chair and he said, sit down, sit down. And it was this big armchair. And his office was in an old Victorian terrace house in Kew in Melbourne. And I sat down, and he pulled out this film from an envelope, which I found out later was my MRI film. And he held it to the ceiling lights. And he said, too many lesions on your brain for someone your age. So basically, your life as you know it is over. I suggest you go and put your affairs in order before you become capacitated, because you have multiple sclerosis. Man, I tell you, that was like getting hit by a bus. And I just sat there, and I think the one word that resonated with me was incapacitated. And of course, when we don't understand what's being told to us, we go to worst case scenario. And I looked at him, and I said one word that whole appointment, and I said, what? And he just shook his head. He said, oh, you heard me. You've got MS, and this crazy sports stuff you do, you're not going to do that again. You're going to have to quit work, and you're going to have to go on a whole bunch of drugs. But to be honest, I don't have time for you as a patient. I've got enough people with MS to deal with. So you'll have to go back to your own GP. And with that, he put the film back in the envelope, and he walked to the door, and he opened the door. I was still sitting in that chair, not knowing what to say or do, with that one word running through my head, incapacitated. And then the fact that he told me I couldn't do sport anymore, he might as well have just stabbed me to death right then and there, because that was my life. And he looked at me and he said, hurry up, I've got people waiting. And as I walked towards the door, he slammed the envelope into my chest. And he said, oh, and by the way, see my secretary on the way out. Well, I can tell you that that hallway in that old Victorian house was the longest hallway in the world. It just kept going and going, and I felt like I could never get to the end of it. And I walked straight past his secretary's office, and I remember getting to the front door, and as I put my hand on the handle, I could hear her yelling my name, saying, Mrs. Cook, your bill. And with that, I just opened the door and walked out, and walked into a whole new life. A life I wasn't expecting, a change I definitely did not want at that point in time. And to this day, I don't remember driving home. I don't remember parking my car in our backyard. I remember the next thing was sitting on the couch crying, and our 6-month-old puppy jumped up on the couch, put her head in my lap, and started to whimper, and that snapped me out of it. And I was patting her and more worried about her. And I said, oh, don't worry, we'll figure this out. And at that point in time, I made decisions that you should never make when you've just dealt with some kind of trauma that you've heard. And I decided, because my husband was 10 years older than me, I kept thinking that incapacitated word, and how was he going to look after me later on in life? If incapacitated to me at that point meant sitting in a wheelchair, wearing nappies, drooling, unable to feed myself, unable to do anything, unable to communicate. I was thinking worst case scenario. My husband, I had told not to come to the appointment because my symptoms were gone, so there was nothing wrong. And in that next few moments, the phone rang and it was him saying, "What did the doctor say?" And I said, "I don't want to talk about it. Come home." And the poor guy had an hour of public transport to get home, and all the way home kept thinking that I was dying. And when he got home, I told him what had happened. And then I said, "Before you say anything, these are the decisions I've made. I'm going to give you the house that we've just bought. I'm going to give you a divorce, and I'm going to go home to my parents and my family, and they can look after me." And I must say, he's a really good Australian bush boy. And he told me I was an effing idiot. That's the first thing that came out of his mouth. And I looked at him and I said, "Haven't you heard what this doctor said?" He goes, "Well, he's a bigger one." And his one good piece of advice to me that day was, "Carol, we don't know anything about this disease. Let's get some information and find out first before we start making stupid decisions." So luckily, I had somebody who was extremely supportive that was standing by me and able to deal with it. But life is all about perspective. And I guess it probably took me 6 to 12 months to come to terms with the fact that I had MS, and that, that doctor was so right when he said my life as I knew it was over, but he was thinking in a negative way. And I really like to think in a positive way and look for that positive spin. And I think I drive people nuts that I'm friends with or ride with or help coach, because even if it's a bad day or a bad race or a bad workout, I always find something that's positive. And it's about perspective. So it's not what you see, but how you see it. So 2001 was my introduction to disability. And at that point, I was in a wheelchair. And I always swore I would never use a wheelchair, because that would be giving in to MS. But when it came down to it, it was like, if I didn't use it, what was I going to do in life? But again, change can happen. And where others saw loss, I saw opportunity. And in 2005, I believe it was, I went to a Paralympic talent search day. I wanted to see how I'd stack up with all the kids. And I was 25 years older than the oldest person there. And I went through all the testing with them. And they sent me a letter to ask me to take up the sport of rowing. And I thought, wow, it's not swimming, but it's water-based, it's rowing. So, hey, it should be okay. And I wasn't great at it, but I'm glad I was a really good swimmer, because I spent a lot of time in the Yarra River trying to get back into a boat. But eventually, I went to my first nationals in 2007, and I won the double scull. And I thought, great, because 2008, rowing was a brand new sport in Beijing. And I thought, oh, I want to make this crew. And it was in a Coxed 4. And I thought, I want to make this crew. So, I got a race, and I was really happy that I'd won my event. And a couple months later, I called Rowing Australia and I said, look, I really want to be on the crew for next year. How do I do it? And I had somebody tell me, and it took me right back to that 9-year-old girl, somebody tell me that I would never be good enough or fit enough to ever make a national team. Well, that was like waving a red flag to a bull, because I thought, how dare you? Anyway, he sent me an email outlining what he thought. And I replied to his email. It took me a couple days with a very terse, but don't tell me what I can and can't do, in a very nice way. But not only did I send it to him, but I copied in the CEO of Rowing Australia, Rowing Victoria, his boss, and my coach. And funny enough, a couple weeks later, I got an all expenses paid invite to come to Canberra to be part of the very first camp to try and get a boat of 4 up and running. And in 2008, I was named on the team. And we tried to qualify for Beijing, but we missed out by 0.8 of a second. So here I thought, all these years later, I was 47 years old, but all these years later, where I had this dream of representing my country at the highest pinnacle of sport, that it was going to finally come true. There was no thought of not making it by any of us in the crew. And unfortunately, when we didn't, I just went downhill, and I just thought, I can't keep doing this. Get over it. Don't worry about it. And it was my sister through cyberspace, through an email, that kicked me up the butt and said, why are you worried about the destination of where you're going? If you're enjoying the journey, if you're enjoying rowing, then just enjoy rowing. And if something happens and you know, along the way, then great, but just enjoy what you're doing. And so I did. She was so right. And I got into the crew in 2009 again, and we came 6th at the World Championships. And all of us thought, this is fabulous. We've got 3 years to train together. We will be in London. Rowing Australia had a different strategy in place, and they dumped our crew. So again, it was like, oh my God, like change. What do I do now? And of course, being pig-headed and stubborn, I just took up another sport, cycling. Same mechanics, but unfortunately, because of my MS, I've lost my ability to balance. But I found out there was a trike category. And so I had an old 22 steel kilo frame, and I just got on that thing, and I made my first team in 2011 for the World Championships with this huge, heavy 22 kilo bike. I ended up winning 2 silver medals, and I thought, wow, okay, next year is London, maybe we can get there. But you know, life doesn't always go according to plan, and you can have these huge up and down roads along the way, but you just have to persevere. And in June, at 50 years old, in June of 2012, I was standing in a hotel in Queensland, and an email came through saying I had made the team. So here I went up this, like, whoa, this is great. I phoned my mom. I woke her up in the middle of the night and said, oh, I've made it. A week later, I received a letter saying I was off the team because somebody had appealed against my spot. There were only 6 female spots for cyclists, and another woman felt she deserved to be on there more than I did, and that she would probably be a better prospect at medaling. The problem was I had to race the men in London because there weren't enough women in my category. So she could have been right at that point. But I was bound and determined not to let that stop me. I kept training. A couple of weeks later, we went to a hearing, and I was back on the team. And, you know, I ended up winning the gold medal in the time trial, even against the men. It was handicapped, it was factored, but I was able to prove my worth of being there. But life has to continue on, and there's other things. And obviously, I wanted to do something to give back and to keep busy, because I'd had to leave full-time employment. And that's when I came up with the concept of MegaSwim. And that was back in 2001. It was to be a one-off, one time only, raise enough money for the Go for Gold scholarship program for 1 year. That first year, we raised 22,000 and made enough for 2 years, because it was only 10,000 per year. There was only 5 scholarships handed out each year. And I thought, fantastic, we've done our job. Until somebody at the back of the room, when we're handing out awards, yelled, when is it next year? And I thought, no, it's not next year. We've done our job. And everybody started going, no, this is great. You need to have it again. And I thought, oh my God. But as we all know, it's still going strong in, well, if we could get out of lockdown in 2021. And it's all across, all down the, mostly down the eastern seaboard from New South Wales down to Tasmania. I then wrote a book in 2014. I started writing it, and it came out in 2016. Or sorry, it came out in 2015, but in 2016, I went back to the Paralympics, and I actually won 2 gold medals. I didn't have to race the men. I just had to race the women at that point. And I felt like there was something missing. So I added another chapter, changed the name, and that's when it became Finding Your Inner Gold. I've now become a speaker. I've used what I've learned over the years dealing with a chronic illness and trying to defy what people have said, and not letting MS become who I am, but have it being a part of me and just something I live with. And I'm lucky enough that I've traveled the world speaking. And then last year in lockdown, I wrote my second book called The Force Within, kind of a biography and lessons learned from my family as police officers. And there's a few juicy stories in there about my time on the job working undercover. And that came out August 1st. So available at all good bookstores. Not that I'm trying to push it, but hey. So 24-hour mega swim. And I grabbed all these different pictures because it is such a wide range of people, you know, from volunteers who give up their time. Rotary became my best friend, the Fitzroy Rotary Club, because for 20, well, they're still doing it now, but for all these years, 20 some odd years, they've now been doing a 24-hour barbecue and feeding people at my mega swim in Fitzroy for free for 24 hours. You know, we've had kids as young as, I think the youngest we had was 9 months old, who swum at a, mom has pulled him up and down the pool. But to elderly people, I think the 94 might have been the oldest that we had, I think, at a swim in Shepparton. But it's just such an amazing event. And of course, you can see Michael Klim there. We got him involved, and Daniel Kowalski, and quite a few of the other big name swimmers. And, you know, everybody has embraced this. And I'm happy to say that, you know, since 2001, we've raised over $11 million for MS, and to help people apply, well, help people follow a dream. You know, that is the most important thing about this fundraising, is that it goes directly to people living with MS. They can put in for a scholarship just to follow a dream that they've always wanted to do and maybe not have been able to do it. So for me, it's a legacy that I wanted to leave so that, you know, people can live better. I've been so lucky with my life and with the way my MS has panned out, and I know others haven't. And so if I can help make their day, or a minute of their day, better than the minute before, then I think I've done my job. So I had a 9-year-old ask me this question at a school, and she stood up all, you know, prim and proper. And I thought, oh, this will be a good one, because she'd had her hand up going, oh, 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 for the whole time I talked. And she said, if you could go back in history and change what happened, would you change the fact that you were diagnosed with MS? And I looked at her and I said, how old are you? Because nobody had ever asked me that. And she goes, I'm 9. And I said, are you sure you're not just an older woman in a 9-year-old's body? And she just completely missed the point there and went, no, I'm 9. So it was quite funny. The teachers laughed anyway. But the diagnosis has made me who I am. And I don't think I would ever go back and change the fact that I was diagnosed with MS. Do I want a cure? Of course I want a cure. But it's given me things in life that I never, ever would have had. Never would have started Mega Swim, would have been no need for it. I wouldn't have known anything about MS other than the fact that, funny enough, my grade 7 librarian started the MS readathon in Canada. And I was one of the first people to ever do readathon. That's the only thing I knew about MS. I didn't even know about it. But I knew that there was a disease called MS. I became an ambassador for MS, and I've met so many people through that. And I did see a couple of them on here today before we started. So, you know, we go out and educate and motivate people. And to me, it's like the best thing that I could possibly do, is if we can educate people about the disease, then that's fabulous. I've become an author. That I don't think would have ever happened. I would have still been climbing the corporate ladder and just working day in, day out. And I think it's made me a more empathetic person. It's made me a better person. Not that I was a bad person before, but it's made me realize that there's more to life than just earning a paycheck and going to work every single day and not looking around us at what is happening around this world and being part of that. I've started doing a bit of advocacy work, which, you know, if I can help anybody, then that's great. And I don't have a problem talking in front of people, but other people do. So if I can help out, then that's what I want to do. I've become I had my elite athlete career at the start of my life. Then I've had 2 careers, with policing and then Australia Post and climbing the corporate ladder there. And then I went back to elite sport. And I guess with the postponement last year of the games, for me, compared to other athletes, it wasn't a big deal. I think the only thing I worried about was that I was going to be 60 at these games this year, and would I still be able to have the strength and speed to race against the 30-year-olds I was going to have to race against? I wasn't one of these athletes who'd put their career on hold, who'd put their schooling on hold to pursue a once in a lifetime opportunity, which a lot of them did. A lot of Olympians and Paralympians have. And so to have that postponement was devastating. For me, it was like, okay. So I'm really lucky in that fact. So I've been to 3 games now. Funny enough, with the crash, it left kind of unfinished business in my head. And I mean, Paris is only 3 years away. However, I will do exactly what I've done every year before that, because I did not ever expect to be at Rio, let alone Tokyo. I was happy to go to London, and I figured that was it. But I take it a year at a time, almost a month at a time, and I make goals within that month or that 6 months. And then all of a sudden, the years just fly by. I'm now a nine-time world champion. I think I've got to get back to the World Championships next year just to make it an even 10. And because they're in Canada, so I can go home for a visit as well. And of course, 24-hour Mega Swim. It was my baby. It still is. I still follow everything that's going on at all the swims. I have retired on the 20th anniversary. I don't think anybody at MS believed I would, but it was like, nope, this is the last one I'm running, and it is. I went last year. Fitzroy was lucky enough to be able, within their unlocked period, get the Mega Swim in. And I went and I showed up with about 2 hours to go. And I thought, wow, I don't have to stress about anything. I can just watch the finish. So that was really good. But I have learned a few lessons with having MS. One, nothing is impossible if we dare to face our fears and believe in ourselves. You know, you can accomplish anything if you put yourself into that headspace. To love the journey and not the destination, because today's not a dress rehearsal. You know, you can't change what you did yesterday. If you screwed up or made a mistake, you can learn from it, but you can't bring it into today. You can bring that into today, but you can't change the fact. And we have no idea what's happening tomorrow. So why worry about it? You know, live today as if it's like for today. Don't worry about the other things. And people look at me and laugh when I say this, to be happy and look at life as a terminal illness, because if you do, you'll live it with the passion that it ought to be lived with. If you have a terminal illness, you have no idea what day you're going to be gone from this earth. So why don't we live that way every day? You know, I honestly believe that too many of us wake up in the morning and think, oh God, here we go again. Like, I have to admit, I did that yesterday in lockdown. For the first day in the whole 2 weeks, I woke up yesterday morning and thought, oh, I'm just over this. But that's because I can't get any fresh air in here. And I'm looking out at the Yarra Boulevard in Richmond, where I actually train. So I think the cycling gods were making a funny there by giving me a window that looks over all the cyclists going by. So close yet so far. But we have to wake up every morning with passion and saying, what can I accomplish today? Because there's too many people, and I know it's hard in lockdown, but even in lockdown, we have to do that. We have to say, right, it's another day. What can I do today? It's so important for our mental health and our well-being. And to see every difficulty as a challenge, a stepping stone, and never be defeated by anything or anyone. I thank my mom for that lesson of thinking outside the box and just doing what I wanted to do. And she gave me that permission to do that. And I've used those 2 lessons right through my life. You know, the teacher, the gymnastics lady said I couldn't do it. Then the rowing guy said I couldn't do it. We even had a coach within rowing that said we would never be any good. You know, so it's really important to believe in yourself and just deal with yourself and what needs to be done, and believe that you have the ability to accomplish what you set out. So just to finish, I'm going to leave 3 things with you. You have to dream big, and I don't care how old you are. You know, I had this huge dream as a 9-year-old. It took me 41 years, actually almost 42, to get there and see that dream accomplished. And winning that gold medal in London wasn't success. The success was getting there. Actually getting there, doing the best that I could possibly do, giving 150% out on the track, having nothing left in the legs. If I'd come dead last that day, I still would have been successful because I'd done the most I could do. And I look at that silver medal in that picture around my neck, and I think the same thing. You know, I wasn't going to Tokyo for silver. I was not going for silver. I was going in as reigning champion. I wanted that gold medal. And I did. I gave it everything that I could do. And I left no stone unturned in the lead up to it with training, heat acclimatization, doing things that most people would look at you and go, are you nuts? But I wanted that. I wanted that gold medal. I didn't get it, but I can't be unhappy with the fact that I won silver because I'd done everything I could possibly do. And I medaled for the 3rd time. So it doesn't, you know, the 3rd games in a row, I actually come home with a medal. So you have to dream big. You can set your little stepping stones to it, but you've got to come up with a big dream. You have to take 2 words out of your vocabulary, can't and never. And it's funny, I said this at a school, and an 8-year-old stood up, and little bugger, he put both words into a really good sentence and made me look like a fool. But I don't think you can let anybody tell you you'll never be good at something, or you can't do something. And again, I thank my mom for bestowing that lesson on me. If you believe you can, then you can. And look, you know, I always say to people, you got to try something new, get out of your comfort zone, you know, and it doesn't have to be sport related. It can be anything. It could be trying a new food that you've been too scared to try because you think, oh God, that'll be horrible. But, you know, it could be singing outside of the shower. I mean, we know that we all sound fantastic. I know at least I sound fantastic in the shower because of the acoustics. Outside of the shower, not so good, but I love singing. And so don't tell me I can't do it. I'll be in my car, and I don't care if it's summer or not, the windows down, I'll be singing at the top of my lungs to the radio. And it doesn't matter if the car next to me is looking at me like, oh God, shut up, because that's horrible. It's something I like to do. And I think it's really important that we all do the same thing. If there's something you want to try, then just try. Don't let anybody say that, you know, you can never do that or you can't do that. And believe in yourself. You know, this is the really big thing. I don't think enough of us believe in ourselves and our capabilities. And belief is so important, because if you don't believe in yourself, then nobody else will. You will exude that, oh, don't worry about me, I'm no good at that. If you have belief and walk into something and say, yeah, I'm here, this is me, and I'm really good at what I do, and I love what I do, then everybody else will believe that too. So belief in yourself is so important. Now I will stop sharing. Oh, stop share. There we go. And
I believe we have a couple of questions, Carol. So do you mind?
I just thought I'd show you. Yeah, no, that's great.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
It's the only thing I have with me because it came with me obviously home. But there's the medal. That's the front of it with the Paralympic flag, and then that's the back with Tokyo. And I think the really interesting thing about these medals was that they were all made from recycled iPhones, iPads, electronic devices that were donated by the people of Japan. So every single medal is made from those materials. And it's funny because they are really heavy. And I know my London one was heavy, and so were my Rio ones, but this one seemed much heavier. And being an elite athlete, yes, I had food scales with me. So I have weighed it, and it weighs 567 grams. So over half a kilo. And yeah, so, you know, to me, it's just as good as those gold medals that I won as well. But yeah, questions, shoot away.
Questions. Well, I believe Karen has asked, Carol, what was the difference between your mum telling you to choose a different sport from gymnastics as compared to the rowing guy telling you couldn't do it? In the first instance, you redirected your energy, while in the second, you pushed back.
I think because I, as a 9-year-old, I think my mom was giving me the permission to make a choice, which I never even thought of. Of course, at 9, who does think of that? My focus was strictly on gymnastics, and I did gymnastics right through up till high school. I just was not ever very good at it. And, I think if that woman had said to me, had put it in a different way and said that I was the wrong body type, that might have been a bit different than you're too fat. And I mean, I struggled through my entire life with thinking I was too fat. And I honestly blame her for starting that. I mean, there were other things that happened along the way, but I blame her for starting that. And I think I'd come to that point where this guy from Rowing Australia, I was an adult now, and there was no way. It was like the doctor telling me I could never do sport again, and that I would have to do these things, and whatever his decision was. And I decided that day that nobody was going to tell me what I could and couldn't do. And when that rowing guy said, "Oh no, you'll never be any good at it, don't worry about it," it's like I wanted to prove him wrong. Whereas, back as 9, I went, "Oh wow, I have the opportunity to make a choice." And my mom would have backed me, but she, gave me that option of, well, if you want to go to the Olympics and this lady doesn't think you're going to be good enough, then try something else. So I think that was I got pig-headed and stubborn the second time.
Fantastic. Sharon asks, says, so inspiring, Carol, especially in these tough times. How did you manage to achieve so much when dealing with the symptoms of MS?
Look, I think you tend to learn to live with them. And to be honest, it's funny enough, I hadn't had a relapse since 2008 until last year. And it was in November of 2019. And it scared the hell out of me. And I thought, well, maybe that's it for cycling. And actually, a lot of my coaches thought that was it. But I tend to, I have my bad days, and we all have bad days, and you're allowed to have bad days. And I think I finally woke up one morning after a couple of days of feeling really sorry for myself that I'd had this relapse. And I kicked myself in the butt and, punched my head and said, get over it, just get back to what you know to do. You've done it before. Yeah, albeit 2008 and a long time ago, but just get back to what you know and just work out how to get yourself back into it. I deal with symptoms every day, and I hate to say it, unfortunately, they become the norm, and it just becomes part of your life. I know that my disease is probably progressing a bit, and I know that things might go downhill. I mean, that's MS. It's a progressive disease. But I'm ready for it. I know now, because I lived in a wheelchair all those years ago, 2001, 2002, I know that life still goes on, and I can do things in a different way, and I will never stop doing stuff. It was funny, I spoke to a school yesterday, and one of the kids asked me a question. Well, if you can't cycle and you're not rowing anymore, what Paralympic sport will you take up next? And I just kind of looked at him and went, well, if I'm sitting in a wheelchair, then I'll either take up shooting or archery, because at least then, I can still do that. And I'm a pretty good shot because of my police background. So, but yeah, it's just living with it. It's just, understanding that some of the symptoms are not going to go away. And my symptoms get worse when I train and my core body temperature goes up. But I now know how to pre-cool and cool myself afterwards, so that I know it's not a relapse. It's just symptoms that I just live with.
I guess for some on the call that may not sort of fully understand MS, what are some of the symptoms that you experience?
Well, it's a disease of the central nervous system. So it affects the brain, the spinal cord, and the optic nerve. So, I mean, no two people are alike. Everybody's different. And sometimes that's why, well, in the years gone by, it's been so hard to actually diagnose. Now there's, just amazing MRIs and all kinds of diagnostic tools now that they can use. It can be anything. It can be pins and needles. So for me, I have like a burning sensation in my feet. And it's constant. It's 24/7. It's like pins and needles, like when your foot goes to sleep, but it's warm, if you know what I mean. And if I get tired or I get overheated, it gets hot, and it gets burning hot. And there's nothing, and putting ice on them is the worst thing you can do, you know. My relapse last year, I started losing the ability to speak. So I couldn't find words. I knew in my head what I wanted to say, and the words wouldn't come out. I knew exactly, I could ramble off a sentence in my head, but I couldn't get them to come out. I started getting pins and needles in my fingers, and they spread down to right down to my elbow. But then it got to the point where the sensation was so bad, I couldn't touch anything. It was like an electric shock. So I'd lie in bed trying to go to sleep with my arm in the air. It was terrible. So there's balance problems. It can go right from anything that your nerves deal with can cause a problem. So what it is that our nerves are covered with a fatty substance called myelin, and that keeps the nerves safe. It's like a wire you plug into your wall. You know, the rubber on the outside is protecting the wires, and the myelin does that to our nerves. And so multiple sclerosis is Greek for scarring, means that my immune system attacks that myelin in multiple places, possibly on one nerve, possibly else, you know, on multiple nerves. And so when the message is trying to get through that nerve to whatever it is, it could be for your feet to walk, it gets stuck at that place where the myelin is broken, and it either passes slowly or it stops altogether. The myelin in some cases can rebuild itself. So most people are diagnosed with relapsing and remitting MS, which means that the myelin will regenerate itself. It'll build itself back up so that you'll get back to normal. And then usually after about 20 odd years or so, you can end up with progressive or secondary progressive MS, where that myelin might not build right back up. So you'll have a bit of disability creeping into your life. And then there's primary progressive, which once you start having an attack, it doesn't build back up. So your physical symptoms, you get right, you know, wheelchair bound. Some people have been bed bound. So it affects anything that has to do with the nerves. So it's everything, you know, it's your eyesight. One of my first problems was the optic neuritis, where I couldn't see anything on the peripheral, and yeah, balance, bladder and bowel issues. I've had my whole large intestine removed because the nerve completely died and it just wouldn't work. So, you know, that's an extreme, and a lot of people wouldn't have that. But yeah, there's fatigue is probably one of the worst ones, because you feel after 8 hours sleep like you can't get out of bed. So there are just so many things that can happen. And like I said, no two people are alike. We might all have similar symptoms, but none of us are exactly the same.
Well, thanks for your insight into that, Carol, because I think that's really important for us to understand. Yeah. Another question from Brett. He says, truly inspirational, Carol. Thank you for sharing some of your amazing journey. You mentioned that you take short-term view to action, striving to make each day better and to be better each day. Do you also set longer-term goals? And if so, how do you approach this and measure your progress?
Oh, excellent question. I always set long-term goals, but my long-term goals at this age now are for a year. And I always look at the year ahead. So, and especially in sport for me. So at 60, like the girl who beat me in the time trial is 31. So she's half my age. So I don't, you know, yes, I'd love to be in Paris to try and get that back, that gold medal back, but that's too far for me. So I will set a year-long goal. And for this coming up in 2022, it would be go to the World Championships in Canada will be my goal. But I have little races in between. So there are other competitions around the world, and hopefully we're traveling by then. But I also have nationals. So I'll set little targets along the way, and I'll look at little things to do with cycling, like power output and cadence, and not so much the speed, but just those little things that go into making speed. And even in workouts, I'll have little targets of what I want to set. So that's how I look at, you know, in my sporting career. And I have obviously I have coaches that help me along the way. I have cycle coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, nutrition coaches. Like there's coaches in my life everywhere. For any other part of life, like my speaking business, you know, I set certain goals and I try and make those goals little steps along the way. And I often use the analogy that, you know, you can look at the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, but you can't just jump there. You have to take each little bit step by step to get to the top. And not that I've ever climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, but I have a friend who lost both his legs in a climbing accident, and he did climb it with no legs. You know, he went up and that's all he did. He took it one little, you know, legs or swing through his arms at a time to get up to the top. And I think that that's what we have to do with any of the goals that we set. Have those great big dreams and goals, but make sure you put stepping stones along the way to attain them. I think, Lisa, you've gone on mute.
Sorry, yes, I've gone on mute. Someone's doing some gardening in the background and it's a bit noisy, so I put myself on mute. Sorry about that. Trevor says, awesome, Carol, love your positive energy. Exercise has obviously been a wonderful for your MS. Are there other things that you do that may have kept your MS at bay? And would be keen to understand your thoughts on nutrition.
Oh, I am the wrong one to ask about nutrition. You know, at the beginning of my MS journey, my mother went online to find every kind of thing that could cure me. There are heaps of nutrition guidelines and programs that some people with MS follow. I find as an athlete, some of those programs I just can't follow. I just don't have enough energy and protein, like a combination of protein and carbs to enable me to do that. Some of those diets actually take out alcohol and chocolate and like real sugary things that I really love. So I like having a glass of red wine or a piece of chocolate. I don't go overboard, but I absolutely love that. And I think life is too short to cut those things out of your life. I honestly believe in moderation. In saying that, when I get out of quarantine, man, I'm going to just gouge myself on everything that I haven't been able to have in here. But yeah, it's exercise for me is keeping me walking. I got out of the wheelchair because I had a really good rehab doctor, John Olver at Epworth in Richmond, who was using Botox on kids with cerebral palsy to release their hands. And he decided he would try it on my legs. And at the time, it wasn't part of the PBS, so you couldn't get it. It was so extremely expensive, but he used me as a teaching agent. And I'll be forever grateful for him because he gave me Botox in my legs. I had real intensive physio for 6 months and then more Botox. And that got me up and out of the chair and able to start walking. But I found the one good thing was getting back in the water and doing exercise in the water that I couldn't do on land. I couldn't walk any distance on land, but I could walk in the water. And that just helped strengthen me. And then I slowly built into what I'm doing now. And I mean, what I'm doing now, I'm probably more fit now than I was when I was 16 as an elite swimmer because of the amount of training I'm doing, but it certainly hasn't happened overnight. It's been a slow build. But yeah, I'm sorry, I like nutrition wise. I do have a nutritionist through the Victorian Institute of Sport, and she's amazing. And she just says to me, just eat what you want. And then when I'm coming up to competition, I eat to compete, I eat to train. So it's all about, you know, looking at what I'm doing on any certain given day and throwing in carbs or taking carbs away and throwing in protein. So yeah, very, very scientific when it comes closer to racing days, but I love my food. So
yes, well, sometimes it's more about the enjoyment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you, Carol. There is some lovely comments in the chat, so I do encourage you to have a look at the other comments that are in the chat. But I thank you so much for your inspirational words that you've said to us today. And I guess we're really pleased that you didn't take the advice of that medical professional that said, pack up your life and, you know, but it's, what was the word you used?
I'm trying to think what he said.
Yes. What was the word that stuck in your head?
Oh, incapacitated.
Incapacitated.
Yeah.
Well, we're pleased that you chose not to take his advice, and we can clearly see that you haven't taken that advice on board. So
never. And can I just say again, like the donations are still open for the swim. Please, even though Monash wasn't able to hold the swim, please dig deep and donate, because you have no idea what this does for people with MS in helping them live a better life, even for a minute. It's just truly inspirational what they do with a couple $1,000s that changes lives. So thank you so much for having me. And let's hope that 2022, you can actually have the swim, which would be really nice.
That we are really hoping for that. We'd also like to extend our thanks to Melissa and Emily from MS for joining us today and helping us to deliver this webinar. And along with any of the MS Megaswim participants who registered for this year's event and weren't able to participate. Emma, do we have a slide for the fundraisers? So we're just going to pop up onto the screen the top fundraising teams and individuals. So Caleb McRae has been our highest fundraiser, so we'd like to acknowledge Caleb for his fantastic efforts in raising over $600. We've got Georgia Kirkpatrick. I need to increase my screen. It was the second individual fundraiser. And then Matt Horton's fan base for the highest fundraising team. So we'd really like to acknowledge everyone that has fundraised for this event, and those funds will still go to such an amazing cause. And we would encourage anyone that hasn't donated to put in a donation. So fundraising events like this have been highly affected by lockdown restrictions, so we'd really appreciate your donations. And as you mentioned, Carol, we are really looking forward to hosting our 10th year again next year in 2022. So yeah, thanks again. And don't forget to join us on our free Active Bodies online workouts. We have 3 new classes on the schedule and you can find it on our website. I believe Emma's going to put a link in the chat. So thanks everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and we really appreciate Carol's time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Lisa.